It's the same thing that
it is
anyone
interesting.
could do.
Yeah, the ultimate determinant isn't your physical conditioning, and yet that's what everybody focuses on. It's what's going on internally, mentally, neurochemically that's making the difference. And the people that are able to best calibrate that and find these, strategies for managing that are the ones that get through, whether it is an ultra or buds. And buds is like this perfect, it's almost like its own lab, right? For studying human resilience in a certain respect. But you have actually taken some of these people and tested them in your lab, including David Goggins, right? So what do you do when these people visit you and you're like, I'm going to deconstruct you here, figure out what makes you tick?
Yeah. So I had the good fortune of meeting David at a consulting event a few years ago, and I guess I should just say, David is, you probably know this already, but he is every bit as intense as he comes across.
Yeah, I mean, what you see online is exactly, it's exactly
what you see is what you
right.
get. Really wonderful and obviously extremely impressive human being. So little David anecdote. So the night before we had this event, he came out to the lab. My lab, we study fear, we study courage, we study resilience, and we study the underlying neurochemical substrates for those. So we had a bunch of guys there, a couple team guys, some other folks, and we bring them in this little room and we do virtual reality there. And one of the things that we use to scare people or to generate a sense of autonomic arousal is this experience of diving with great white sharks, which of course you're not in water in the laboratory, but it's very immersive. And for people that are afraid of sharks, it can be quite scary. Not always, but we also have heights, we have claustrophobia, we got something where you can feel spiders crawling all over your body if you're an arachnophobe. If you have a pain point, we find it.
Do you spend time trying to figure out what that pain point is?
We do, and we do it through some very covert methodology that involves AI and some fun tools.
A bunch of weird questions that, right, all right.
Let's just say this, from the moment you step into our laboratory, we're studying you. So now
I know.
And yeah, exactly. So what was fun was, so I sort of explained what the platform was and what we were going to do. And David said, he goes, I don't like sharks. And I was like, all right, well. And so then, this was not a typical experimental day in the lab. So I just kind of, at one point I finished describing what the tech is and how we're going to wire people in. And then I said, so who wants to go first? And he's like, I'll go.
Right, of course.
And what was funny to me at that moment, I realized this is interesting because he was very explicit about the fact that he didn't like sharks. He was very explicit about the fact that he was going to be first man in. I mean, it would be inappropriate for me to describe his data, right? And we didn't do a full-blown experiment. But what I can say is whatever it is that David has figured out how to do, it clearly involves taking whatever adrenaline pulse he feels and understanding something fundamental to biology, which is that adrenaline response was designed to move us, not to keep us stationary. He uses behavior as the way to shift sensation, perception, feelings, and thoughts. He understands how to run that program in the right direction. Whereas most people, when they don't like what they feel, they start negotiating sensation, which will never work. They start trying to control their perception, which is hard, right? They're like, oh, I'm not gonna think about that, or I'll think about it differently. Very hard to control the mind with the mind. He knows that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Feelings, Lord knows what those are and how to control them. I mean, we'll eventually figure that out as a field, but thoughts are complicated. So he just goes immediately to action. Immediately to action.
So when he says, just for clarity, when he says, I don't like sharks, he's basically saying, put me in the shark tank. Like he's cueing you to say, this is the thing I'm afraid of, and I'm going to be the first one to volunteer, and I know you're going to put me in the shark tank if I tell you that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, and I obviously can't speak for him, but one of the things I think is very clear is that he's tapped into this neuroplasticity process through the door, through the portal of agitation and stress. He's figured out, and this is really the holy grail of neuroscience, is how can I modify my brain? Well, you modify it by placing yourself into discomfort and using that as a propeller to move you into action. And a couple years later when David was working on his book and I heard the book was coming out, I think I saw a pre-release announcement, I texted him and I just said, look, I'm really excited to see your book. And he said, oh, great, thank you. It'd be great if you'd write something about it, like an endorsement. I said, oh, I'd be honored to, I'm happy to. And he said, but I need it tonight.
Right.
And this was Saturday at, I think it was like 10:30 at night when I texted him. So was like, great, well, like, I'd be happy to. I won't do it now. He said, I need it by midnight. So I sit down, I start writing this thing. And these are short blurbs, but I kind of realized that, you want to get it right. It's David, and, my name's next to it, and I want to do it justice. So I'm sitting down, I'm working on this thing, and I text him, look, I'm going to be a few minutes late. No problem, no problem. Finally, I send him the thing at like 12:30 at night. And he's like, oh, bro, thank you. I promise I'll send you a copy, this and that. And I was like, grateful, thank you. And then I realized that that time he was living in New York. And I said, wait a second, where are you? He said, New York. And I said, it's 3:30 in the morning. And he goes, yeah, I'm going running.
Of course.
And I realized at that point, I was like, okay, it's undisputable.
Right.
This guy lives the persona that he projects into the world. And even that day, that consulting gig, there was a 4 o'clock lag, and he was like, no, let's keep going. So he's figured something out. And I think that his enormous popularity it's earned because he's figured out that it really doesn't matter if you come at something from a place of joy and love, and that would be wonderful. But there's a whole other set of ways to approach this that involve slogging through the discomfort, the doubts, the wish for things to be different, and starting with behavior. Yeah. And it's incredible because if you think about sensation, perception, feeling, thought, and behavior, actually the way to control our nervous system and feel the way we want to feel is to run that backwards. Behavior, thoughts. So if you change your behavior, then generally your thoughts, your feelings, and your perceptions change.
Yeah.
And everyone tries to come at it from the other end, but he's figured out through whatever process led him there and incredible life circumstances, how to run it in this direction of behavior first. Yeah. And I really think that if neuroscience has anything to offer, it's some understanding of what the underlying chemicals and neural circuits are, but the sooner that the human species can start to understand that our feelings and our thoughts and our memories and all that is very complicated, but that when behaviors are very concrete and they are the control panel for the rest of it. I don't want to relegate feelings. Feelings are extremely important. I don't want to relegate perception. They're extremely important. But when it comes to wanting to shift the way that you function, to get better or to perform better or to show up better or to move away from things like addictive behaviors, it's absolutely foolish for any of us, me included, to think that we can do that by changing our thoughts first. It's behavior first, thoughts, feelings, and perceptions follow.
Mood follows action.
Mood follows
action. This has
action.
been my mantra forever, and I swear by it. And David's example illustrates that act first. He's developed so much neural plasticity that it's reflexive for him to just move towards the hard thing or the challenge or the discomfort, right? And now the science establishes that this is indeed the case. And yet our programming, our default hardwiring is to put us in this place where we want to ruminate on all this stuff and wait until we feel like doing something before we do it or check our motivations for it. But anytime I'm in a funk or I want to change my state, I have to move forward. I have to do something with my physical body in order to shake things up and rearrange whatever's going on mentally. So, and it works every time.
It works every time because the brain circuits, meaning sets of connections and chemicals, they're there from birth. They're there your whole life, and they were designed for that. So in 2018, a graduate student in my lab published a paper in Nature showing that in the face of a physical threat, there are three options. You can obviously freeze, you can retreat, or you can move forward. And the moving forward response actually triggers activation of a connection in the brain to the dopamine circuitry of the brain and makes it more likely that you're going to be able to move forward in the future. Now, what was interesting to us was that not only is forward action rewarded at a neurochemical level, which then sets you up for more forward action, but the highest level of agitation and stress was associated with moving forward. We always think, well, if I just calm myself enough, I'll be able to move forward.
Right.
But it's the exact opposite. Yeah. And so people who are paralyzed in fear or that have a hard time initiating, sometimes the key is to raise the level of stress and agitation. This is why deadlines are so effective.
Right.
This is why fear is so effective. This is why that deer gets up out of its, nice little den and starts to move because it feels a certain level of agitation. If that agitation isn't high enough, we will not move forward. And so especially in the US, we have a culture in which stress has been created. These ideas around stress is that it's terrible for us, when in fact stress is designed to move us forward towards these action steps that are rewarded, which then move us forward, and so on.